Broadway Limited recently came out with their all-new tooling Paragon 4 Southern Pacific GS4s. I happen to have a locomotive from their Paragon 2 run a little over 10 years ago, and I have a more common brass model from the Southern Pacific GS series. I figured we could take a little video comparing the three of them and just get a look at how well detailed the new Broadway Limited release is. Looking at the front, we see that as opposed to the Paragon 2 run that had a recessed number board on the nose cone, the Paragon 4 run is actually raised around the number board, which is much closer to the prototype. We have the air horn, which in the Paragon 4 run, this is representing post-war. A lot of the times they were painted. This one, I think the air horn is basically just depended on what the shop did at the time. They either painted it or left it, so no big deal there. The original coupler on the Paragon 2 run is right here. It's actually a pretty decent length. It fits pretty well. The Paragon 4 run came with a coupler that extended pretty far out, so I removed that, put in a KD coupler, and had to do some filing, but it looks a lot better now. I removed the magnetic glad hand. They did add silver paint on the tips of the air hoses. I see the aluminum striping on the pilot. It's a little bit different color, but I think they're both metal. It's just one is shinier aluminum, the other is more of a brushed color. It changed the color of the smoke box a little. I think the Paragon 4 one is closer to the prototype color. It's the paint that they used tended to fade towards white over time. But one of the things I did notice is on the Paragon 4, they decided to use the color of the sides of the smoke box for the exhaust stack. I don't understand why they did that, because all the pictures I've seen, it was black. And you see that the colors of the lights, this one is a pretty good color coming right out of the box. The Paragon 2, it was quite the bluish color. I ended up tinting the LEDs themselves. Turning off the lights, you'll notice that that's when you can actually see the numbers on the Paragon 2 one much better. But if you have the lights on or off, the white numbers stand out really well on the Paragon 4. Looking at the fireman side, we see the differences between the Paragon 4 version and the Paragon 2 version. There seems to be a much finer crispness, if that's what you want to call it, for the different colors on the paint job. There's a little bit, there's a slight haze maybe, or just the fact that the line is thicker for the pinstriping here. The arch also seems to be a little bit more prototypical. There is a little bit of a difference in the builder plates. I'm guessing this one is modeled more after current 4449. In historical pictures, I only see these two plates. The top rectangular one, I don't see. One of the differences I've noticed, I don't know if it's just based on what version you get for Paragon 4, but this one for the Paragon 2 came with the star on the wheels indicating the spring lubricator pads. My Paragon 4 version came with just bare axle, so I ended up painting it and adding the star decal. You also notice that there's a little bit difference in the rivets. Both models have the rivets. It's just the model for the Paragon 2 seems to have larger, more visible rivets, whereas the Paragon 4 version, they're just more refined. I think the tooling itself has become more refined. They may have been able to keep the same design for the tooling, but refine them because there are quite a bit of similarities between them. Other difference that I notice is the daylight logo. I've seen people say on other reviews that they're not correct on, the placement. Looking at the historical pictures, there is a difference in the placement of the daylight logo on the fireman's side versus the engineer's side. So as far as I can tell, it's actually close to the prototype how it is. It's probably due to all of the different doors that are in the skirting. Another difference, again, just like the nose cone number boards, we see the train indicator boards, the clear on black of the Paragon 2 does not show up nearly as well as the white on black. Go ahead and turn off most of the lighting in here, and you can see that's when the Paragon 2 one is much more visible, while Paragon 4 is visible with the lights on or off. Another thing you'll see is that the class lights stand out much better on the Paragon 4 version. Moving on down the engine, we do see some more examples of improved paint quality that they have. We have the black striping that outlines the numbers in the train number on the cab, which is present on the Paragon 4 version, but not the Paragon 2 version. We also have much finer detail when you look at the engine data. The print quality just seems to be much higher. I have seen versions of historical pictures where it's spread out more like this GS2 version or Paragon 2 version, and later in life they seem to be more following what the Paragon 4 version did. One thing that I do see that is present on the Paragon 2 but not in the Paragon 4 is if you look right here, you can see the outline of basically was used as air scoop for ventilation into the cab. That is not present here. Back at the tender, we see that they have done more refinements from the Paragon 2 version. They've also added some more pad printing. We have the tender data located here that is not present on the Paragon 2 version. We also have this, I believe it's a plaque that is on the prototype that is present on the Paragon 4 version that is not on the Paragon 2. Again, the rivets, just like on the engine, are much less noticeable on the Paragon 4 version, but still present. And looking at the markers, the Paragon 2 version does not have any markers on the back. Paragon 4 does. Prototypically, these were only lit when it was running engine light on the road, but they're there for something that you can have a little bit extra of. If you do prototype lighting mode, you can then control whether or not they're going to be on. So depending on how you want to use this engine, they're there for you to use. Looking along the skyline casing, you see all the details are there in both versions. They're just a little more refined, brought down more to scale in the Paragon 4 version. Everything is there. We have sand hatch, the dome, pop-off valves, the whistle down here in the middle, and the 3 dynamos that are there to run the electro-pneumatic brakes, the gyro light, and the other lights such as the headlight and cab lights. Here on the engineer's side, we see pretty much the same thing that we saw on the fireman's side. Paragon 4 just pretty much increased the fidelity of their details. One thing that I did notice, I did a quick look in some of my reference pictures. The Paragon 2 has these 3 plaques on both sides. The Paragon 4 only has it on this side. the Paragon 4 is correct. The Paragon 2, they must have just copied one side, put it onto the other, and called it good. Again, pretty much just more refinement over the Paragon 2 version. Not much to really talk about on this side that wasn't covered on the previous side. We just have the throttle linkage here. They're on both sides, same level of fidelity. I don't really have much more to add for this side of the engine. Engineer's side of the tender, not much to really add here either. We just are pointing out the extra printing that is on the Paragon 4 that is missing on the Paragon 2. And that's about it for this. Well, you can see on the top, both have basically the same amount of details, just more refinement from what I can see on the rivet size. Looking at the rear of the tender, not much more to really add for the post-war prototype version. We have just a more accurate sizing of the engine number that's on the back of the tender. Pretty much the same details, only addition is the actual marker lights here as opposed to just piping for the conduit and brackets for absent marker lights on the rear of the tender. We do have just an additional paint added to the airlines to give it the more metallic appearance. Over the years that I've had the Paragon 2 locomotive, I've had to make several changes to it. First off, one of the things cosmetically that is nice about the Paragon 4 locomotive is that it came with pilot wheels that were already painted black as per the prototype, but the Paragon 2 version came with shiny metal wheels with no paint on them, so I ended up having to paint those. Not a big deal, something you can easily do. However, because it lacked traction tires, it was not a very good puller. One of the contributing factors of that was the smoke generator in the front of the engine took up a lot of space that should be occupied by weight, causing it to be quite heavy on the rearmost drivers. This caused the front drivers to want to climb off the rail when it went around turns. The leading truck also had springs on it, which is not present in the GS4 locomotive. That is the Paragon 4 version. So changes that I had to do with the Paragon 2 version is I straightened out that spring a little bit so there is less pressure. Added, I think, about an ounce of tungsten putty to both the pilot and the smoke box. I packed it in around the smoke generator and in the nose cone. I don't run the smoke generator generally. It still can run. I left it there just in case I felt like it, but I don't really use it. Changes I could make in the future now that they have more runs of these is to pull out that generator. But right now, I added a little bit of bullfrog snot. Most of that's worn away by now, but it is now a pretty heavy locomotive with balanced weight on its drivers, and it can pull quite a bit. The Paragon 4 version, it still feels quite light in the front end, but the addition of the traction tires seems to have really helped out with its pulling capability. I still would like to see more balance on the drivers. It doesn't want to climb the rail like the other one did, but I still would like to add a little bit of weight in the front end, and there's no spring to straighten out, so it's all going to have to be weight. Here we can get a little bit of a comparison between the brass engine that I have and the Broadway Limited ones. This one is built by Katsumi, which built GS4, GS5, GS2s, GS3s, GS6s for a lot of brass importers. A lot of these shared the same flaw, where if you notice the gap here underneath the number board is a little bit too big, which made it so you can have the engine number of the proper size, but no engine data, or you would have to reduce the engine number size in order to get the data in there, which is just a flaw shared by all of them manufactured by Katsumi. I ended up pulling the motor out of this, replacing it with a Canon motor. It's a really good puller. It's a really heavy engine. The drive system is really solid. This is the factory paint job, but you can tell it's a little on the crude side. You know, the lines are pretty thick. You can see the rivets are pretty big on it. Other details are much less refined. It's just an engine that was really good for its time when the GS4s weren't really being built, but you can use it for a really good pulling engine. It's just not the most spectacularly detailed one. There are really expensive brass engines that are incredibly well detailed. This one just happens to be one that was built, put out there in great quantities, almost like a plastic model. Now we can go ahead and take a listen to some of the sounds. There are plenty of videos out there that go over the movement, the sounds. I just felt like doing a little bit of comparison here at the end in case you stuck around for it. The Paragon 4 version, all I've really done is reduce some of the sounds so they aren't so overwhelming, because out of the box it is quite loud. Paragon 2 version, pretty much out of the box. My Daylight that was built by Katsumi, that one is a Scale Sound Systems boiler barker that I have in the smoke box, running off of a Tsunami 2 Steam 2 decoder. So first off, we'll go ahead and unmute the Paragon 4 version. So I'll hit the bell. The whistle. And then I'll just have it move forward a little bit and go ahead and go back. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and mute that. I'm going to unmute the Paragon 2 version. I'll do the bell, whistle, I'll go ahead and mute that, and we'll take a look at my brass. So bell, whistle, All right, and that about wraps it up for me. Overall, I think this new release is really nice. It's definitely something that is able to run on any layout that you want to represent the Southern Pacific, and it will look really good in front of any passenger consist that you would have representing the Southern Pacific. They have many different eras. They put in pre-war, post-World War II, and then several of the paint schemes that 4449 has lived in prior to current day. And I think they actually do have a current day one too. I don't know if they've made changes right now. So I think it's a very good locomotive. Improvement over Paragon 2 and definite improvement over some of the bargain brass that's out there. Thanks.